Great. So I think we're just gonna be a small bunch today because it's starting back up after a month away. Howdy, Nancy. Thanks for joining us. Maybe people are just all running as sluggishly as I am this week. And so we're all sort of trickling in. But I'm gonna
Yeah.
get us started. Hey, Nancy.
Hi, thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience with me needing that schedule shifted by a month. And I hope you guys have been having good summers. Mine has flown by. I don't know where it went. I'm still looking for it. So I had promised you all that I would try to get a video in anyhow. And in the better late than never category, there is a video posted up on the YouTube. It is a whopping 6 minutes long because I had to sort of edit it together as I realized I had been on with a friend. It's a lot easier to record when there's somebody to talk to. And so I'd been on with a friend, but I managed to not set myself to be the spotlight person. So 2/3 of what I recorded was her half talking and no video of me. So I clipped together what I could, and it does represent what has gone on the clasp. But if you, we're going to talk through it as well today, but if you want to see a sped up version of what was about 2 hours of working on the first half of the clasp that we've been talking about, that is up on the YouTube channel. And I don't think we have anybody new today, so you guys don't need the usual spiel. I think everybody already knows my Rio code, and you may or may not know, but I have a clasps workshop, 3-day workshop, October 18th through 20th, and a hollowforms workshop, December 13th through 15th. Oh, I did promise that I was gonna try and adjust that if I could, so I may look at my
Are they
calendar.
virtual?
Yeah,
Both
those
of
are
them are
virtual.
virtual?
Yeah, so you do them from
Okay,
your own
cool.
studio.
Cool.
And they're 3 days, pretty intensive. Those folks that have taken my 3-day workshops know that we go nonstop. It's basically a combination of I talk for a while, I teach for a while doing active live demos. I don't do video demos. And then we pause and you guys do some work at your own bench while I stay available to you to answer questions. If anybody has something that I think will benefit the whole bunch, I'll either wait until we're coming back together as a group or I'll call people back briefly for it. And then we show what we've done, talk about where we got stuck, that sort of thing. And we do a few cycles of that each day with a lunch break somewhere in the middle. Although for everybody, somebody it's on the East Coast, it's sort of a late lunch. For somebody on my coast, it's probably a early breakfast or something. I mean, a late breakfast. But we just sort of go 7.5, 8 hours for the day for 3 days straight. So it's a lot, but we jam in a whole lot in there too. The clasps, day one is usually a bunch of wire-based clasps, leveling up some of the ones you might already be making, adding some fanciness to them. And then day two is usually the box clasp. Because no matter how many times I learned box clasp, there was always more to know. And those folks that have already gotten comfortable with the basics can always do a box clasp that's integrated into a larger hollow form instead of just doing the basic box clasp. And then day three is an up in the air, depending on what people are interested in, alternative clasp. Sometimes I do a hinge based clasp. Sometimes I'll do a toggle locking clasp. And it's not expected that you get every one of the clasps I demo done. It's you pick and choose based on your own experience level what you want to do. Hollow forms is even more general than that. I talk about a bunch of different forms. We usually do a bead form to get the idea of it, and then work on something that most people put into a pendant or something larger that has some negative space in it. Again, that's one that if people are more advanced, then we can do concave and convex and conical and all kinds of fun stuff with that one. That's the kind of class that people sometimes take more than once. Any questions about any of those? Okay. As usual, there's not a lot of traffic on the Facebook group, but you can always feel free to post questions up there and pictures of your in progress. And my show schedule is pretty well set. I've got one wait list I'm waiting to hear about, but I will actually be on the East Coast for the first time in a long time. So those of you that are up in the greater Boston area or close enough to it to make it worth the drive, the week before Thanksgiving, I will be out at Paradise City Marlboro, which is just outside of Boston in the 495 corridor. And it's one of the best shows out there on the East Coast. I've been trying to get into it for about 12 years at this point, and I'm super stoked to be going to it. So if you don't get a chance to see me because you're not on the West Coast, maybe take a day trip or a weekend trip. It's a really beautiful show. And then this weekend I'm down in Bend, Oregon, and doing the Art in the High Desert. And in a couple months, I'll be back up in Seattle doing the Best of the Northwest. And that is probably all I'm going to do this year. There may be one more shoved in there, but it'll be a local show if so. Okay. So despite having a month away, I both got more done and less done than I expect to do for you guys. So I would like to show you a couple of things that I've been working on while we were not meeting. Let me spotlight myself before I forget it. I've been going through other projects in the box of unfinished things that I needed to get tweaked up, and two of them are fixes to existing necklaces. So this is the first piece that I've been fixing up, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to share screen so you guys can see what its original design was. These are ones that I was not pleased with the quality of them. I can share screen if my screen button will come up. There we go. Screen 2. Come on. Share screen. Zoom is behaving badly today. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. So this was the original finish of this piece. And I very much like the connection as a concept, but the weight balance made it very fragile. So underneath the stone here, each of these are 3/4 jump rings or full jump rings that have been inset a little bit that slide along the component next to them. And I'll show you those live and in person in a moment on the current state one. But this piece would torque and pull. And so it snapped. It didn't stay connected. And I didn't like that. I tried locking it in more solidly and soldered it all down. Actually, I think my original design was a jump ring on the base here and a jump ring on the base here, and that really was unhappy. Then I tried soldering it down, but it didn't stay reading the way that I wanted it to. It didn't hang the way I wanted to. So I've been unhappy with this for a long time, even though I've had it out on display and people like it, but for me, it wasn't good enough. And then the other piece that I am working on is this one. I love the necklace. This is a John Cogswell design for the clasp. What I've hated all along is how I set the Meteorite. It looked sloppy, unfinished to me. I just needed it gone. It's been bugging me for a long time. This is a fairly old piece. This is probably 12 years old at this point. So I didn't want to do much to this. I just needed to change it up and get a better visual impact out of the centerpiece. Any questions before I pop off of those two? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and go back to showing you the real deal. So what I have done with this, let me show you what I mean by those sliding segments for connectors, is I've changed out the way that the stone hangs entirely. Part of what was causing it to break was that it was an unequal pull on one side and the other. And so I've made it centered down the middle, and the stone will go back in, obviously. And now it has a little more fluidity off of that centerpiece, so it's less at risk of breaking at the top points. And so it's still not, it doesn't have quite the interesting flow. Sorry, I missed a couple things as I was posting. So our class is listed on Facebook. Maybe I post about them periodically, but more often the way to find them is actually up on my website at eclecticnaturejewelry.com. Thanks for asking, Deborah. And so, yeah, this connection is an interesting one. It needs to be fairly heavy gauge to be strong enough. And one of the challenges is actually traveling with this piece, which is, I think, where it got damaged most, is because in order to travel with it, you either have to have it laid out or you sort of stack it back into itself. And if it takes any real abuse, it's gonna crack out, it's gonna torque and have problems. So it doesn't travel simply, but I really like the integration of the units one after the other. Takes a little setting up to get it where you want it. And then this is just a double hook clasp. But I'm much happier with how that, the durability. So this was a functionality thing more than anything else. And it's got to obviously get finished sanding it and polishing it back up and so on. But that was, that's an upgrade that I've done. It did mean redoing the entire bezel and rebuilding the center section into a different shape. And I think I had to redo one side or the other of my largest loops. But overall, I'm happy with that. Any questions about that one? You guys need to see the connectors up close or anything?
How do you put it on?
It's really quite literally just a clasp. And hang on, I'll put it on. It's going to be just fabulous on my Grateful Dead t-shirt that I'm wearing right now, but bear with me. So this is a piece that I really like how it ends up hanging. Obviously not really the right outfit for it. But because those connectors allow it to shift along each piece, it'll fit any size neck. It'll either expand sideways or it'll, if it's a smaller neck, it'll come closer and hang down. And now, I mean, it definitely has some movement to it. Once the stone is in, that'll keep the weight of the center down a little bit. I'm doing a terrible job of showing this right now. Should have worn my fancy black outfit that I always show off my jewelry in, but so it's just an architectural piece. It's a fairly simple necklace, but I wanted to play around with alternative connectors.
So it's an actual hook in the back.
It's a double hook in the back. I'll do a zoom in. So it's a simple
Okay.
clasp.
And how are the sections joined?
That's
Are
yeah.
they
Sure you zoomed in. It's
okay?
really
I see.
straightforward.
Okay.
So
Now
it
I
is a
can
jump
see.
ring.
Yep.
The tricky part is that you have to solder that jump ring closed while there's something slid through it, right?
Yep.
And then the connector, excuse me, the clasp is just a double hook and eye.
Right.
Mhm.
So that keeps the stability of the flow. This sort of sets the baseline.
Mhm.
And then after that, they all want to shift and move. And I really like that it always seems to have sort of like a waterfall-y kind of movement to the pieces when they're together.
Yeah, the fluidity really feels nice. And it does seem like it will sit very nicely.
It didn't look, yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to sit cleanly when it's just resting on the bench because it's sort of awkward looking, right? It's kind of kludgy and doesn't sit well. But let me see, do I have, give me 30 seconds. I'll grab a neck ring and it'll show better than it is on my t-shirt. Hang on a sec.
The craftsmanship is just amazing.
Sorry, say again.
I said the craftsmanship is just amazing.
It's one of those things that I liked playing around with when I was doing the chained one of a kind series is the, as you guys know, is that thing where I build the chains around the necklace. Oops, zoom out further. And so this stone was a little more challenging to create links for. I love this unusual shaped stone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not an easy link to emulate. And so playing around a little bit when it's resting, it's really going to rest more like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that's one. And then the other was the meteorite, and the meteorite was sort of lost in that. I sort of wasted the gold, in my opinion, in that other piece because it didn't really emphasize the meteorite. So in rebuilding it, I still want the flash of gold against the meteorite. This is not going to get shoved in there because it's going to be very tight fit once it's done. That's going to set down in. but I needed something that sort of popped it more. And this was a spare disc from a custom piece that I had been designing that I was playing around with variations on. And it's sort of created a moon in the sky effect for me. So I like this setting a whole lot better than what I had in the original. And it gave me a chance to get the gold a little bit more emphasized. I'm going to also add, so one thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to re-etch my meteorite. It's lost a little bit of its wooden Stoughton lines, which are the little grains in the crystal. I'm going to try and do some emulation of that in Kiambu streaks across the back plate of the silver to pop that design a little bit more. Otherwise, I didn't change this at all. I just took it from the 2 down to a 1 for this final connection. I tried it with 2 originally and didn't like how weighty and awkward it became. This gives a little bit more of a narrowing and tapering down to the front of the neckline. And then radically changed the type of bezel I was using. So that's
I
that.
really love the balance in both of your pieces.
Thank you.
They're great. I really love looking at wire, you know, in pieces creatively, and most of what I see out there is pretty boring. And you really achieved some great shapes. It's just perfectly balanced. I love it.
That's something that is sort of, you know, you practice and practice at it, and your eye will get more trained, and you won't start out by saying, hey, this is perfectly balanced. You'll start out by going, something doesn't feel right. Something's off. It's not quite what I want it to be. It doesn't quite look like the way I want it to be. And what your hindbrain will be trained to do is realize that subtle differences, like you'll see, I do a lot of this progressively smaller ring work. Oh, I'm not zoomed out far enough for you guys, am I? Whoop, wrong way again. Man, I go away for a month and I can't remember my camera settings. So you can see that I go from larger down to smaller chains, but in a subtle evolution. It's not big, 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 tiny, tiny, tiny. It's the growth pattern of it, so that it becomes more delicate behind the neck. Another thing about this design is that I tried to do very little I picked up tiny amounts of the lines that run through the stone. Because there's so much busyness from having a double connector that I didn't need much. And very important to me, I put empty spaces to either side of the super fancy clasp. You don't always need to go big if there's some element that's taking the attention. And this is, if you haven't seen this, this is a knocker clasp, where you slide, one side is locked in, it can't come out because it's smaller than the blocker, and the other side slides in and out, and then it's a friction style clasp where the little ball snaps into place in between the two. And this is the very first thing I ever studied with John, was making this clasp. Not this very clasp, but the style of clasp. And I was sure I was never going to finish one in my entire life.
Looks
It got a lot easier
complicated.
the second time I took the class. So, and somebody asked me recently if I would teach this. And it threw me for a loop, because this is designed by John. This is his concept, this class. And at one point he was teaching for an organization that he does a lot of great drawings, or he did a lot of great drawings for all of his classes. And they took his drawings and sent it off to a fabricator and had them start manufacturing them overseas. And he was very disappointed by that behavior. And so I feel very sensitive about this design. And I realized that with him passing, so when he was alive, he absolutely told me I could use all of his materials for my teaching, for when I'm teaching. I can take copies of the printouts that he gave us and pass them on to students. So I suspect he wouldn't object to me teaching it. I just realized I felt really weird about charging people to teach it. At least at this point, it may be just that it's so soon after his death. But what I have decided is that if I come up with the right project for this series that we're doing, meaning during the free Wednesday night sessions, that I would be okay with doing this on camera to show people how it's built, and showing his drawings in that regard. Because it's a really super cool clasp, and it has a lot more technical challenges than it looks like it should, given its base functionality, which is really a hinge point and a loop, right? So Not, obviously not with the project we're working on now, but I'll try to come up with something where we can get this down on video for people to learn, without me feeling weird about it. I don't know if that makes much sense to anybody, but that was sort of, when I got asked, I sort of had to stop and think about how I felt about it. So those are two of the things that I've been progressing out of my box of unfinished things. And before we get to the other thing that we have obviously been working on, I want to see what you guys have. Who's got stuff they want to share, and what are you stuck on? Anyone? Anybody been doing any work this summer? Please.
I haven't been in the shop,
Oh,
but
no.
I have gone through my boxes and pulled out the things that are worth working on. And some of them, like you say, I took a muffin tin and put
Yeah.
them in there, because
Nice.
then I can sit down and just do each one as it needs. And the other things are on the back plate, because I'm moving forward with other things I want to make.
Okay.
So
That's
it's
what I-
truly been inspiring to do this. And I saw on the email you have other dates. Are we going to continue doing this?
Yes, yeah, so I hadn't realized that I had only put the end of the series through last month or something, so I extended it out into 2025. Yeah, I'm expecting to keep doing the Wednesdays as long as people want to keep watching them.
Yay, thank
Until I
you.
have Mary.
It's fabulous.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't make that
Thank
clear. It was an accidental looking like they were running out, not an intentional one, which may be part of why our numbers are a little small. So yeah. So while you've been sorting things, have you come across any patterns in what you're finding in your box?
Well, one thing I've learned from the things you set out in the first class
Yeah.
was that I do have a consistency in my style.
Good.
And I like that. And so some of the things that I've kind of set to the side didn't fall in that. But
Nice.
other things are things that my line of jewelry tends to be functional, practical, and wearable. That is, my customers don't have tons of money. So I'm not doing solid gold, fancy things, but things that become favorites. You go to your jewelry box and it goes with a lot of stuff and is affordable.
Great.
So, in that sense, some of the stuff that is kind of like, oh, it's playing around, it's kind of funky. The silver I'll turn into other things, granulation and, playing with melting down to work on some of the other types of things I want to move towards.
Cool. So a lot is going into your destroy pile, or repurpose pile. Are there?
Yes, at the price of silver, repurposing was fabulous, right?
Yeah. I actually just turned in my scrap for a crazy amount of scrap. I turned in 10 pounds of scrap the other day to get some bimetal back, because I need the bimetal more than I need this pile of scrap.
Right.
Yeah.
And we always make scrap every time we're working. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you finding that so one of the things I started doing, and I haven't gotten it back finished for you guys, is I started going back through some of my oldest photographs of my work. And I hadn't realized until I did that there are sort of the seeds of some of my later themes in them, way more than I had realized. My texture thing came in a lot earlier than I thought it had, and a lot of my hammer work and things like that. Are there things you're seeing, even though they don't look like your style, can you pick out things and go, oh, that was the inspiration for X, Y, or Z in my current work?
definitely. I do a lot of stamping from my years in Santa Fe, and I have beautiful stamps, texturing the rolling mill. I got one of those Sizzix machines used. So, there's all sorts of things rolling through, plus my rolling mill.
Yeah.
I just recently went a little crazy in some of the Facebook groups and bought quite a few dies And I
Nice.
don't have a press. I can get a press if I'm ready, but a lot of them you can use with a hammer. So, trying to incorporate some of that stuff is some things I want to experiment with. And one thing, I think I mentioned I belong to the Washington Guild of Goldsmiths, and we do a biennial show,
Yeah.
which is up right now. It's called Metalwork 2024. And one thing we do that's really lovely about this group is that we hire jurors and they come in and jury the show by hand. So they're picking up the pieces, and I'm one of the scribes. So
Nice.
I get to hear the comments about everything.
Very
And
cool.
that has taught me a lot. And one thing when I look at my old work, I see lack of dimension. And that's something very much that, it can be simple. Instead of having that flat piece of metal, do something, twist it, turn it, fold it, form it somehow.
Cool.
So that's one of the things that I want to keep working with, because once again, it's simple work. It's not taking you hours and hours, which then makes your costs go up,
It's
but it
elevated by
adds
dimension.
that interest, right? So, in that sense, when I look at some of the older stuff, it's like, okay, yeah, I feel like I was a kid then. Now I have a more mature sense about that aspect. So
Yeah.
that's
Very cool.
been really good.
Very cool. Sonia, did I see you pop on just to say hi, or did you have something you wanted to share?
No, I just wanted to say hi.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Hi. And Carmen, you look like you were getting ready to show something, maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
What do you got?
I have two pieces. I finish this one.
Ooh,
This is the one I had a problem with
Nice.
before.
nice.
So I ended up riveting it.
Yeah. It's gorgeous.
So thank you.
Very nice.
It's got very strong lines. I like it, but it's got the gentleness created by the pearls, and it looks like you found a way to separate the pearls and intentionally leave them separated.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually move it if you want,
You can, okay. So it's a
pearl,
tight fit.
but I
I
kind
like
of
it
like
that
it
way.
up there like that.
Yeah. Very
But
cool.
this part was so hard.
Is that gold or brass or what?
It's gold in my life. In my mind, that's how I visualized it.
Uh-huh.
So
Cool.
the hard part was the rod, because I put the rod through and it's thick,
Yep.
and then it came through the back, and then
Yep.
I riveted it.
Yeah, I like the extra disc to stabilize it. That's a really neat addition.
Thanks. And then the chain I love, because it's just a vintage chain that I
Yeah.
bought, and it's brass.
Yeah, I will occasionally scrounge really cool chains out of antique malls and things like that. They're usually not polished and kind of tangled up, but you can get some really great stuff like that. And what was number 2? Ooh,
I'm still working on the riveting.
yeah. But there's a theme like those two go well together. Like there's obviously you've got some pearls type stuff, and you've got the riveting, and you've got the materials in common.
I love the blister pearl. I want to
Mhm.
find some more.
Yeah. I
So,
think Penny Nissenbaum is a good place for pearls. I think she has pearls.
like this, the blister
I,
pearl.
I'm pretty sure she sells blister pearls, but maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. There's somebody that they call the Pearl Lady out in California, and I might be mixing her up with Penny.
So is that blister pearl drilled and then riveted, or it's just held in place by the tension in the two halves?
I use my lapidary tools to
Right.
shape it
Mm-hmm.
and fit it in there, but no, it's held by the riveting.
Wow. So it can
It's
spin if it needs to.
What?
So can it spin in the container?
Yeah, probably. but I'm not gonna do it.
Okay, you designed it for that direction. Got it.
Yeah, for that direction.
That's such a simple, clean line. Like I mean, it's crisp, but also really a strong statement piece. I like it.
Thank you.
And it looks like you're doing silver rivets on that one
Yeah,
or a pop. I like it.
yeah,
Nice.
I'm trying to mix it. So it started with this one here.
Hang on a sec. Let me get you back on spotlight. Wowza. That's a blister pearl too?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
Wow.
What a great setting.
So I kind of wanted to, I have another blister pearl like this. So I want to
Yeah.
sort of work on this idea, but then I was trying to do the riveting. So that's how the other one came about with the
No,
riveting.
it's a strong series.
Oh, thank you.
And with the materials you're using, I hope that means you can get it at a price point that is a good selling price point for people.
I'm hoping, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I have a show September 12th that weekend and I'll see, but I mean, it's hard to price. It's always hard for me to price.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they're all originals. And the blister pearls I got from my friend who closed her jewelry shop. Remember I talked to you about her?
Yep.
So I don't even know how to get such high quality because these are so,
Yeah, those are pretty spectacular luster.
yeah.
They even show well on Zoom. Nice.
So if
In
anyone
the-
has a source, let me
I
know.
would look on eBay. I have a lot
eBay?
of blister pearls too.
Oh, you
and
do?
Yeah, I've collected them over the years.
You want to sell some?
I have to find them first, but I would look on eBay, and one place that I have found some sort of different sources is the local gem and lapidary shows.
Okay.
Like if you have a club around, and sometimes because they like the weird stuff, right? Instead of just, the classic cut gems or things like that.
Also,
Mhm.
Statura, Joseph Statura, which is the tools and gemstones company, they have pretty high quality pearls. I know they have strand pearls. I don't know if they have blisters.
How do you
You,
spell his last name?
Can you
S-
type that out?
Yeah, let me put it in chat. Hang
It's
on.
pretty hard to.
There you go. And I think I have a website for them. Let me check. StaturaWholesaleGemstones.com.
And perhaps if anybody else comes across anything, you could post it on Facebook. So we might see another supplier somewhere.
Those of you that are in Massachusetts, you just missed one of the best gem shows on the East Coast, which is the East Coast Gem and Mineral Show. But they have lots of pearl dealers there, especially if you can get in the back with the wholesale license. But I don't personally go looking for the flat backed pearls very much, so I couldn't tell you specifics other than maybe Penny Nissenbaum. Let me see if Penny has a website. I'm not sure that she does.
No, did you ever, any of you, did you ever find in those thrift shops or yard sales, in the past they used to use the big piece of the blister pearl? You know what I'm talking about? Like it would look
Oh,
like like an ashtray. It wasn't an ashtray, but
Oh yeah.
do you
The
remember?
large mother pearl out of the
Yeah, like a big
Yes,
mother
yes,
pearl
yes.
clamshell.
I would love to find one of those because you can cut them. I mean, if you have a lapidary saw,
Yes,
you
I will say very, very important. If you are drilling or cutting pearls or mother of pearl, you need full mask, not
Yeah.
like just the dust
Yeah.
mask. Those are some of the worst for
Yeah.
your lungs.
Yeah,
And
But
doing
I
it
heard about that. Mm-hmm.
doing it wet is another good
yeah.
idea.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
of course. Wet
wet.
mask.
Mhm.
Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to share or need help getting unstuck on? Okay. Shall we talk-
I have one unusual request.
Sure.
It's weird because I don't have a rolling mill right now. And in the past, I've, taken classes or been in a studio.
Yeah.
So what I have is I probably have, I don't know, a dozen or more silver dollars, old, brand new ones. And I need to get them to a place where I can flatten them out enough to use, to make things out of. And it's challenging if I use, I have a good collection of hammers from, soft dead blows to the regular ones. And I'm trying to think of a way to get them even enough and get them, the relief off of them,
So are they emotional attachment silver dollars?
Not at all. They're just, I either go trade them in for money, which it's not as useful as having them. So I just have those, and it was with the thought of either melting them down and casting, but I really don't need to do that right now. So it's
Yeah.
more practical to use them.
So I just started working with David Fell. That's where I sent my 10 pounds of scrap. They give
Uh-huh.
91% less a fee, a small fee. It was like $35 for the refining, but they give
Oh.
91% for pure silver, for good silver.
Okay.
So it may, and you get a discount if you immediately turn it over into sheet metal. So
Mm.
you
Oh.
get more for your money if you do I'm putting the money in, I'm taking it right out in the form of new product. So
that's-
you may get value by swapping them into David
You know
Fell.
what? That's
don't
a
have to do the
great
work,
idea. And that's David
right?
Fell.
Yeah, David H. Fell. You will have to get an account set up with them. And for
Okay.
small folks like us, it's a little bit tricky because they do ask you to fill out a form with I think it's three accounts resources. So I gave them my Rio Pros account. I told them that I shop at Auto Fry and I shop at, I can't remember what else.
Yeah, I think I can do that.
Yeah, so it takes a little while to get set up. Their paperwork is kind of weird. And then you may want to call them before you try. You have to fill out paperwork. Because they are a full refinery, you got to fill out paperwork about how you want it converted. And they have something
Yeah.
called a vault account and something called a credit account. Credit
Oh,
account says, give me the dollar value as of the day that you melt it. And vault account says, hang on to my metal on the
Till it
assumption that
increases.
I'll convert it on the day I want to. But again, you get your best value right back out if you immediately turn it around.
Oh, that
Um,
sounds like a perfect solution.
Yeah.
And my other oddball question out there is, my husband and I wound up with a bunch of, and I know that what's the word? I know that the amount of pure metal could vary, but I have a lot of old, dollar coins, like 1800s and stuff.
Yep.
And do you guys know of a source where I could, say, hey, value these and I want to sell them or whatever? I don't know what to do with them, honestly. I don't know what their value is and I don't know, what to do with them.
Have you looked around to see if there's a coin dealer near you?
Probably not near me because I'm in Southern Oregon. I probably have to go at least an hour or two out of my area. But I guess that's what I might. And then the other thing is I don't know, are they trustworthy? It
Yeah,
kind of varies.
that
know.
kind of thing, I would do a first pass. There's a lot of online, you can look coins up by their date and their markings kind of things. So I would personally be doing a first pass to see if the combination of coin and date, and then you also want whatever the little mark is, if there is one for
Right.
where it was minted. You can look
Yeah.
those up on one of the many listings out there for coin collectors. And
It's a
sort of
black
sell
hole.
them into the, pardon?
I said it's sort of a black hole. I kind of already
Yeah.
started doing that, and I said to myself, maybe this isn't the best use of my time. It's
Oh,
just
okay, so you just
yeah.
don't have the patience for it. Yeah, I get
No, I
that.
do, but I can't just get a straightforward answer. They're sort of like clearinghouse houses for places, I just kind of want some sort of an expert that could say, this is your range, this is what you should be getting. And then
Yeah,
I can say, will you give me so much? Then fine, it's done. That's
I
what I'm
was
kind of,
actually saying you do the first pass to get a sense of, are there any that are like, nobody cares, everybody says there's a million of them, and
Yeah.
those are convert, and just so you have knowledge enough, like you
oh, of
don't
the
go
good
in
ones.
blind,
Okay. Yeah,
right?
that
And
makes sense.
then you go to either one of the coin clubs or I want to keep wanting to say numismatist, but that's the stamps. Go to
No, that's the right word.
That's
Is
the
it?
right word, yeah.
Is it? Then what are stamps?
Deborah, try Wilshire Coin in Santa Monica, Los Angeles. They are very, very reputable. I know them
Called
from,
Wilshire Coin.
yeah. Wilshire Coin on Lincoln Boulevard.
Okay, I'm going
I
to
would
write
make
this
sure I
down so I don't
photograph them
lose
all
it.
before sending them.
The other thing is the world is full of Zoom. So you can call somebody and then talk to them and you can, send them pictures or, that whole kind of thing, right? That's
Yeah.
how we operate now. So
I know. Yeah. Thank
And
you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
if
I just
any of
have
them
this
are
pile of
gold,
stuff I want to get out of my life and use
yeah,
it or sell it or something. Yeah.
Deborah, if any of them are gold, unless they rate really, really high, like if they're really old, you're more likely right now to be getting better metal value out of them.
I wish I used to work for a commodities brokerage firm in Newport Beach, and that's all they did is buy and sell coins.
Got it.
So
Nice.
I wish that would make my life easy to
well,
just
with
have gold
gold
to worry about.
with gold at $2,500 an ounce.
That's amazing.
It is. So I just took a quick look with my friend Google, and I see blister pearls on eBay and on Etsy and Fire Mountain Gems. Those are just the first things that popped up. Now, whether they're the highest quality, like everything else in our lives, the better it is, the more it will cost. So it depends on what you would want to. But on Etsy, there's some that are $5. So
So the thing I would say about Etsy and eBay purchases is make sure that it's somebody with a lot of high rated
yes.
positive feedback. And even then people can get fooled. So the trick for checking, is it plastic? You got to heat up a pin and push it against the back, the part that you don't care about. And if it goes in over time, but just be real careful because those are an easy one to fake. Okay, any other open questions or get you past stuck points? Hey, Helen, welcome. Anybody want to show anything else?
No, not me.
Okay, it's time to talk fancy clasps then. So as I mentioned at the beginning, for those of you that didn't make it to the start, there is a 6-minute video up on the YouTube channel of a super sped up version of about 2 hours of me putting together what I'm about to show you on the clasp that we're working on for this necklace. As a reminder, it's the other half. Oops, I gotta actually spotlight myself though. As a reminder, this is the piece that we're doing to counterbalance the gorgeous druzy that was our first start of the project. Now, I carried around my little mock-up with me when I went on my travels and managed to break one of the slots off, which taught me a good thing. I'm glad I carried around because it taught me that my weak point was the extension that was coming off of the narrowest gap. So I redesigned a little bit after my initial design. And here's what I have done thus far. First of all, I used heavier gauge material than I was using before. So this is all 18 gauge, the walls and the back plate. It's going to be a heavy, chunky thing. And I used
Sorry, Rachel. The image is pixelated. Is that only me or?
Anybody else having that trouble?
No, I was having problems with you freezing on me. That's about it.
I am. Well, your hand is moving. I guess it's okay now. It wasn't a minute ago.
Pixelated, like little squares.
No.
Thank you.
That probably is your device.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's probably the
yeah.
internet where you live.
Okay, let me check.
So But also remember that it'll be video recorded, so you can go back and look at it in a non-pixelated form, hopefully. So I went heavier gauge. This whole thing, back plate and walls are 18 gauge. And I went heavier gauge for my rods, knowing that I also want to make them a little more chunky in between. So I'm putting a little more space between the sections. And it's a little bit stronger overall on the piece. But the same principles apply. I also, from the first mock-up that I made, realized that I wanted my gap to be a little narrower than the total. So if I just rest it on there, you can see I've made it a little narrower than the total width. I still need a little bit of a corner on each of them to help catch when it goes into its slot. But I tightened up how much space I'm giving it and made it barely fit. And so I've done all the work to build to this point, which is that it can slide in and out. And I also changed my angle a little bit. So on the first model, I just went diagonally down to where I was headed. And I realized that in order to get the best stopping point at the bottom, oops, see if I can, maybe I'll zoom in for you guys for a moment. So what I mean by changing the angle is instead of just going diagonally, I'm now going diagonally and then, oh, too far out, diagonally. And then the last little bit, I go straight down. So you see these little turns that I took at the ends. This is not finished cleaning up. I've got a little bit more work to do once we get our final cuts in. But that little turn is going to help make it rest successfully right where I want it to be on the flush end. So our today's exercise is that we're going to cut through the little notches that we need on here and here. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm zooming back out because I keep going out. There we go. So that extra notch means that, again, part of the reason for that turn in the first place is because if I had it just go straight up, once it's in place, it could slide back out by accident. But when I have the turn, that becomes a lot harder. And so today's activity is going to be about cutting in the little notches on the sidewall and then putting into place the little blocks of metal that are going to support this, making it a little stronger to keep it locked in. All right? Questions about what I've done so far? Basically, I built a heavy wall bezel, but the steps that I had to take, I had to pause before putting the bezel down because I needed to integrate my cuts very precisely. So I did the cut in the plate before soldering down my walls. And the part that I forgot the first time I did it was that you can't actually cut all the way down because then it takes your entire piece out. So I had to start over after my first cut. And what I really needed was to only take away this material. Okay, I needed to stop. And my wall will go right there. But I managed to cut all the way through on my first pass because I wasn't thinking. Questions about what I've done while we were away?
So when you feed the piece in, you're going to slide it so that it turns and lies flat.
It's going to be attached to the back plate of the stone setting.
Okay.
With enough room that I can tuck behind here.
Right.
It gets tucked in, up, and then when we've got the cuts in place, this will lie flat.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yep.
So zigzag in, slide through, and I have the 3 channels because only 2, and it would have a lot of wiggle room to be able to get out. This having an extra piece is kind of like the way that they put notches on keys. Right? There's only one way it's going to fit in. It won't fit in if I reverse it. Well, it'll fit in, but it won't go anywhere if I reverse it. Right.
Yeah. You said you're gonna remove something?
I'm gonna remove a little notch in the front because I need it to lie flat by the time it's done.
Right.
So that's this step,
I
right?
can't see anything. Your hands are not
Oh,
visible.
sorry. So this is the original model we did with just a little bit of a broken piece on it. But so we're here right now. We need to be able to do that.
To make those little holes. I
Yep.
just call them holes. I don't know.
So
Okay.
yeah, they're continuations of the slots I've already cut. They're just turning at a right angle up the wall,
Right. Oh, okay.
right? So I'm gonna take here away, here away, and here away. But I only want it to be the barest amount that I can just get this lip resting, because by the time it's done, it should just be sitting there flat against, but inside.
Yeah, if you were to make your slots too loose, then it would be wiggling and moving up and down.
Yes, and I'm also going to be putting blockers in. It's a little hard to see, but there's these little blocks that I put.
Rachel, can you move your camera here? Because you need to move it so it's up so we can see
Up.
the other part of your hands, or back a little bit so we have a wider view. Yes, yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, so these little squares, and there was another one right where it broke off. Those are the blocks that I'm cutting so that they fit. There is just enough room for this line to stop there, right? It gets stuck there. So it comes up and over and goes click into place, except this way. See how my blue stops and my bar fits nicely right behind it? Is that close enough? Can you see that on this camera? Or is that
Yeah, we can see.
too far away? So we're not only going to be very good about keeping our slots as minimal as possible, but we're also then going to put the blocks in place, and I'm going to make them a little snug and then do some very careful filing away to get them so it literally should have a click action if I do it right.
Mm.
Okay. So these
Mhm.
mechanisms, these pieces that we've put together, I haven't ever seen a clasp like this before, but I've seen pieces of this clasp conceptually, right? There are things where you need a mechanism that snaps into place. Like that's part of the principle behind the tongue of a box clasp, is it has to go beyond a lip and click up behind that lip. So in principle, it has some of the components of that. There are also keyhole clasps where there's an insert and twist until it doesn't have a place that it can slide out, right? And all of those need to be snug in order to fit properly. You want them, otherwise they tend to wobble. In the case of a box clasp, the tongue will flip flop a little bit and it eventually can wear down. In the case of a keyhole clasp, if you make it too loose, it can just jiggle around and gradually work its way back to the slide out point. You're counting on some of that tightness and tension to hold the mechanism together. So this has, once you learn concepts of clasp making, you can take those concepts and play with variations on the theme like we're doing here. So with that in mind, I'm going to measure what I got for height on this. This is actually 9-gauge square wire. I thought it was 10 gauge, but I must have rolled it myself and gone a little thicker than I meant to. But I'm going to take my dimensions off of the thickness of this band. And that's going to be my maximum height that I'm going to cut up to. So I'm going to put some marks down so that I can see where my height ends, which is not very far, right? It's going to be just barely above. And I'm going to err on the side of caution because that is going to be too short, because I'm still going to be resting on the back plate, but I want to file the last of it to make sure it's nice and snug. So yes. Deborah, thank you. You can actually go and see the 6-minute video up on YouTube to see the mechanism being built as we go. Oh, but you missed the original, the mock-up that we did. So yeah, this is a lot. There's a lot of steps in this one. So I've got my cap. cap marked off, and then I'm gonna go back and remark those blue lines, because I need to know my width and direction. And then we get into the fun thing of sawing down a corner. And so the only parts that I actually want to saw away for now are right inside, and I'm always going to err on the side of too small. So I'm going to very, very carefully try to trim this away. And this is, I put my saw. This is an intriguing exercise because you have to cut up and then cut across without cutting the plate behind it. So it's a little bit of finagling. And this is one of those things that you can take away from something woodworkers do, which is when they're trying to get something out, they will do a bunch of small downward cuts, and then it becomes so easy that they can just chip away the layers beneath it instead of having to cut the cross piece. They can sort of bend and pull them away. We can do the same thing in metal. This blade is maybe on its last legs. Let's see. Come on. So again, I got to watch for my bottom line. I don't want to go too low. In this case, I can get a diagonal, so I'm not going to have to do that crazy angle cut. It's not always possible depending on what you're working on. So I'm just taking out the tiniest of notches, and I'm going to work my way down with files. The rest of it, I just need to get it started, the cutaway.
And this cutaway is not possible to do with a burr?
It could potentially, if you have good burr control. But remember, we want it square in this case because it's square wire. I chose square wire for this specifically because it's easier to latch in than the round wire would be. Not on this little notch I'm making, round wire would be fine on the notch, but in the locking little blocks that are going to be inside of it, it'll be easier to do that locked in square wire than in round.
Yes, you're right.
So my challenge on this kind of a cut is always to make sure that I'm not accidentally cutting the far side of whatever I'm working on. I was risking doing that, so I'm just going to peel that out with the pliers. What I gotta watch out for is this upper side that I'm not cutting in. Okay, so those varying degrees got closer to my line. That last one I got a little more bold, but the other two definitely need some cleanup. And I'm going to use a square file or a triangle file. If I have a small enough square, I'm going to use that, because my triangle file is a lot bigger. And this is going to be one of those painstaking, tiny amounts of filing at a time. If you don't have, if you need it, you go to this even smaller size files. And again, be careful of what you're filing other than what you expect to file, because it's easy to catch the side prongs. And check your drop frequently. Also, I realized as I was filming the 6-minute version of this, I I have a habit that I was taught far too young to break. If you can keep yourself from holding your finger out on your files or your thumb or whatever, anything, any individual digit extended, it especially shows when I'm doing large scale filing. When I do that, that is a terrible, terrible habit and is straight to the carpal tunnel problems that a lot of us end up with. So if you can get yourself to hold your files without that level of forward finger, do it. I can remind myself of it. And I can get myself to stop for minutes at a time, but I automatically go back into it. I've been doing it for so long.
What number is the file? What roughness?
So this one is, so the problem is the files that I'm using are antique files and therefore their scale doesn't relate much to what you're going to find today. This is a number 4 in antique files, which is probably a 4 or a 6 in modern day files. And you can't even always find 6s anymore.
Yeah, it's
So
difficult.
it's very fine. Okay, again, I'm still watching my bottom scratch line to make sure I don't overdo this. And I'm getting close, but I want to check and see where this is going to fit. Okay, so what I get from immediately putting this in here is that I don't have enough width on one of them. I need to go a little wider. In fact, on 2 of them, I'm going to need to go a little wider out on this one, and then a smidge on that one to give myself the room to do the fold. Because I'm trying to get that side more than the top, I'm going to switch to use a barrette file briefly to get the side wall. It's my barrette file. So I'm only hitting the side for a few moments. Okay, and now I'm getting better positioning. Oops, I got a little bit more to take off of the far ends to square that up. I'm getting better positioning, which means I need to go deeper than my original mark line, because that's going to be the difference between the thickness of the base and where I need to land. But now I know my lines are lined up pretty well. So I'm back to the square one and digging it down a little deeper.
Rachel,
Yeah.
what keeps you from not going at an angle, keeping it straight?
You mean,
Because
how do
you're,
I make sure I'm not doing that?
yeah,
Practice. And
okay,
sometimes I still do anyhow.
uh-huh,
Yeah, so part of it in this particular one is that I have a limit. I'm headed straight for this wall whenever I'm filing. So it's a
Uh-huh.
built-in, if I'm angling, I'll duck under. And I can see that if I'm going straight on, I'm hitting the wall, right? That means I'm perpendicular to the ground. and I mean parallel to the ground. And so it's the right direction. But yeah, we're all, no matter how good we are, we're all gonna have some kind of unconscious physical bias in a direction. Like there are things that I can do, like if you've ever had trouble making a left and right version of an earring, you're
Yeah.
better at one side than the other. It's just the way our brains connect to our physical actions is that we don't always get it the way we want.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I find helps me is paying attention to my contact with the file. So yeah, I can pay attention to how level it is, but it's developing that feel for is your file fully contacted? And paying attention to what your elbow does, because I feel like my elbow, you know, if my wiggle my elbow, my hand moves and then I'm not level. So keeping your arm, you know, steady, it seems to
Yeah.
make a difference for me.
Yeah, hang on a second, I'll show you guys the pose that I use when I'm filing. Oops, that's not switching to the right camera. Hang on a sec. So when I'm filing, my elbows are tucked in as much as they can. And one of the challenges a lot of people have, especially when they're filing like the ends of things, is that they'll curve as they're filing. The more you pick up your elbow, the more inclined you are to curve, or if you're out doing pigeon wings, you're more likely to curve. Part of it is if you ever grew up learning to like do your nails and stuff, we're usually doing those up in the air. And so we got bad habits for actual solid filing. So when you get to that point, remember that if you cross your hands like an X while you're tucked in, so your elbows are in and you're going across yourself, you're going to come up with a pretty good 90-degree crosshatch, right? It's going to provide you that. So if you can be filing across yourself diagonally, coming out of your elbow points when they're tucked in, that's going to give you a fairly straight line of filing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so let's see how we're doing. We need to take a little bit more off of the outer one. So what I'm working on now is the nuance of when I put the piece through. It's not quite willing to rest flat yet, which means that it's catching, almost there, but it's catching on something. So I have to find the points at which it catches, one of which is here and one of which is here. I've got to take a smidge off this side and a smidge more off of that side, which means I judged a little wrong. So I'm going to have a slightly wider than I'm happy with gap on my outer one, but I'm looking pretty snug on the other two. And this is one of those things that when I was in my early practice, I would never have the patience for, like this stop and go and check and stop and go and check. I wouldn't have the patience for it. You got to give yourself the time to make enough pauses to get an opportunity to correct if you're going off track. And that's really hard to do, especially like I would always fail right at the end as I was just getting to the things that I was excited by. I was like, I can feel it, it's almost done. But if you don't learn to have that patience, I mean, this is an art form we're all still learning and will be, hopefully, well into our later years, picking up new skills and improving our process. So give it time to really work its way out, you know, do the steps. Do the work, man, do the work.
Mm.
Okay, getting close, but I still need deeper now. So I'm getting the angle right, it's sliding up, but I now need to go below that line that I first set up. So I'm back to going straight down on the little notches. And what I need in order to get this where I really want it is just a little bit more than my 18 gauge sheet plus the dimensions of the insert that I'm using. I'm trying to keep as squared off on my side walls as I can to give me the cleanest fit. So every once in a while I'm switching from working my way down to refreshing the upright walls. Oops, little guy. All right, we're getting close, gang. You can see that it's each time I do it, the angle is better. Again, it has to be all the way down. And I probably need to clean up a little bit of my corner soldering there. So if you have an interest in the concept of the mechanisms of clasps, one of the best things you can do for yourself is go find a mom and pop hardware store, one of the, like, maybe even an Ace, because those are usually mom and pop run, even though they're a chain. But the more non-big box hardware store that you can find, the more you're going to find in their connectors and mechanisms. You're going to find all kinds of cool things that could become clasps on jewelry, or for which we have an equivalent. So like dog collar connectors and so on, and climbing gear and devices for opening and closing windows are all really good baseline capture mechanisms, right? And there is a clasp variant of most of the ones you'll find. So you got an excuse to go wandering a good hardware store. All right, we're almost there. It's getting better and better with each pass. So close. Where am I lacking? Let's see. Center one is the big problem. if you're bolder than I and you're trying to play along at home on this particular class, you could measure that height plus the thickness of the 18 gauge and start with your cut closer. But I guarantee you, if you cut even a little bit awry, you're not going to leave yourself the room to make these adjustments that I'm having to make.
Is this the first time you're doing this type of class, or you've done it before?
Yeah, this is an invention for this project.
Okay.
I mean, I made the mock-up, but yeah, this was a design of necessity for what we were, what we had evolved to as we discussed, that I realized I really liked the two halves. I really wanted negative space, but I also needed it to be able to be closed and couldn't see the links being a back behind the neck closure by the time we were done putting all the weight on the front. So this is an invention. You are seeing it being made as we invent it.
Cool. You can call it the
And
Rachel.
I can tell you with certainty, this is my weak spot in this design. So I'm already debating whether I need to build something layered on to give it a little more meat of support. The only thing I could really do is take a fold of metal and build it across as a plate. And I may have to do that to give this more strength.
What gauge is the bottom?
18. But even if it weren't, my weakness is that there's this tiny little bit of solder holding it in the corner, which is why having something that goes up and over would strengthen it. Let's see, what am I getting jammed up on now? I'm going to do a little cleanup of my piece itself, my tongue, because I can't tell which of my jam up is solder that's on the piece and which of it is the angle needing a little more correction. Put this down on the surface. This file is dying. Let's see what else have I got. Got one corner in here that's causing me grief. So critical to this is that my interior corners be nicely squared up too, or else they won't lie flat against the segments that we're sliding them through. So I have this blob of solder in between the two little guys, to a lesser extent at each of the other corners. Just tiny amounts of solder can get in your way on a tight fit like this. That shape. Yeah, even that little bit cleans it up a fair amount, but I still need deeper segments. So this right one, I mean, this left one here is probably pretty close because it's got a little more wiggle room. But until I can get that all the way flattened out, it's not open. The holes aren't open enough. And now that I'm underneath the back plate, it's a lot harder to stay straight on the way you were asking about, Carmen. Because I have no stopper at the other end, like I'm now filing in underneath that line. So I'm getting a little wobblier on my corners.
Would you consider soldering, like you said, a piece now before you finish?
I have to get the mechanism lined up to know what's possible. There we go. So we now have the flat that will become the attachment so that they rest against each other.
Mhm.
I could probably give myself a little bit more cleanup. In fact, I will have to, because you can see it doesn't quite snug up. And I want it really, really flush. Not this piece, but I need the bar to be really flush in order to lock it in with whatever supports I put in there. So I think that I'll probably do my wrapper improvement once I know I'm ready to put those in and do it all as one big solder exercise. Because in order to get this really solid, I'm probably going to want to put a full line of folded back plate, which is going to be interesting to put in there. And then I'll have to cut away to what I've already built away from the solder plate. So we'll see. I got to think about that one. So let me do a little bit more cleanup on this. And what are we at for time? Just because I have not been paying attention.
It's 7:56.
Local time is 6, right? Yes, local time is 6. So I was hoping to get to positioning the piece inside, because we're going to be setting this inside, but let me show you that with the lock in place. I'm not sure we're going to get that far today. We'll see. So we've got this, and we were going to set this offset inside of the piece, which is going to need a little cleanup before I do. But I cannot put the top in place until I've finished building the inside mechanism, because it's going to be locked away.
Mhm.
And you're going to fit in there right now.
You're gonna solder the top?
So I'm not today. I don't know that we're going to get to that today, because I don't think I'll have this clean enough, and it really needs to be done before I do. But what we're going to do is put this sort of a millimeter or two inset inside the frame.
Okay.
To offset it similarly to what we're countering the similar look that we're going to get out of the stone's bezel, right? So the stone is going to have a little bit of material coming up and over, and then this is going to have the same thing to counter it. It's a subtle difference, but it's a much harder situation to solder for a top plate. So one of the things that I talk about in my hollowforms class is order of operations. I talk about it like crazy. And there are very specific things that change the order of operations from what you would do normally. So for example, if I'm making my whole hollow form out of sterling, and there's no piercings, there's no insets, no posts I got to put inside, nothing like that. It doesn't matter whether I do top or bottom first, right? But if, for example, I'm going to use Kyambu as my top, Mokumegane as my top, that is more fragile when soldering. So I'm more likely to do that as a last step. Ditto with reticulation silver usually, because it can be too easy to get it to flow and blob all over the place while you're soldering. Except, so sorry, the reticulation I would usually do first, because it's one of the hardest ones to do, because you have to line up your texture, your wall edge to whatever the texture is. So I would normally put my reticulation silver down, make sure it's solid, do the back after that, and because it's a cleaner fit. However, because I need to put this inset, because I'm trying to design this with this inset, I can't put my reticulation silver down. And because I need to be able to see my mechanism and build it, I can't put that. So I have to build in this order. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining the order and the why, but I can't get to this mechanism if I've covered it up.
Yeah.
Normally, I would have put my reticulation silver down first and built out the back, but because I'm doing a mechanism, I can't. Whew, that was what I really meant to say. That said, the added factor of now trying to do an inset makes it extra challenging, because in order to do an inset, I'm going to need to put little stitches, or I could alternatively build an edge wall for it, except that the edge wall would interfere with what I'm building on the front edge. So I'd have to cut it open anyhow. So I opted for, I'm going to do the stitch technique. This is a technique that I learned for doing reticulation tops to boxes. Yet another surprise, John Cogswell technique. So we're going to, at some point, once our mechanism is solid, we're going to build this inside, which hopefully will be next session, because I don't think we're going to get to it this time. Questions about what I'm doing so far on edging this out and getting the fit the way that I need it to, which is now lying relatively flat compared to it. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more cleanup and get it so I'm real happy with it. And then we're going to tackle the question of how am I going to wrap it to strengthen it, and putting in the blocks that we need, because again, I need little chunks of material that this is going to snap into between the wall. Oops. So even though it's in place, it can still wiggle around right now. If I put blockades, it's going to have something that it has to lift up over and then snap down into. And that'll give us our little magical click that we want once we've got these blockades in place. But I can't do the blockades until I have a good clean fit. So a little more cleanup on the interiors.
And when you put those blockers in, are
Yep.
you going to solder 3 separate pieces or do a bar and then cut out?
Huh. I am going to solder them separately, because the cutting out action of back and forth movement would put a lot of strain on our weakest buddy, right? Because I'd have to forward, back, and it would be wiggling this as it went. So I'm going to stick with the way that I did it in my mock-up, which is one piece at a time. I mean, I'm going to solder them all down at once. So
Right.
soldering exercise. But the trick that I'm still stewing on as I file is how am I going to strengthen, how am I going to create a wrapper for this? And it may be that I need a full face plate with the fold over, which is going to create a look on the back that I'm not sure I'm thrilled about. So this would be a perfect exercise for a good folding jig. And somewhere in my tools I never used, so they got packed away, is a small folding jig. But it would be exactly what I need to get, because then I could do the whole back plate with a second sheet that folds up to cover the front. I'm gonna do this one in paper, because I sort of am rambling at you guys and I want to make sure you understand what I'm talking about. Oh, I have a sticker, that'll make it easy. So again, my weak spot on this puppy is wherever I've got just a little bit of solder, because this is going to take there's going to be spring action pushing against that every time somebody puts the piece in. But if I can take a piece of silver that is whole and fold it so that it's got no seam behind it, cut away some of this so that we can actually see what it's going to do.
A whole piece.
A whole piece of silver would be ideal, because then my back plate is consistent looking. My second choice would be to just get the fold beyond the rod points. So let me see if I can sketch out where our cuts are going to be for you. Right, so this is what's gotta get cut away, plus the little bit we've just been making. But the act of having a wrapper come
Mhm.
up and over without any solder point, with this whole thing being seamed in, even
Mhm.
after I cut it back away, it's still gonna have a piece that flows across, so I'll have built this piece solidly on up, and it'll have a whole lot more activity supporting it. It will be less likely to break away individually. But it has to be a consistent wrapper, or else like if I were to do, actually the outside doesn't have to be consistent. I have to make sure that I'm not doing anything differently between each joint, each slot, or else it won't rest evenly,
Mhm.
right? It'll have something sticking out further. It won't look clean when it's resting in its closed state.
So are you going to use a fairly thin gauge for the wrapper?
Yeah. Yeah, because it's going to be bolstered by solder and by, this is going to suck to solder, guys. It's going to be bolstered by solder and its strength of fold. So I don't need much, and I don't want to add a whole lot more weight, but that's essentially my template for what I need to put on the back. If anybody has alternative ideas for strengthening, I am open to hearing it, because this is not going to be a fun solder.
Riveting.
Riveting would actually, unfortunately, weaken it, because it will interrupt the metal band. In this case, riveting will weaken it. Any other ideas out there?
Laser soldering.
I don't know, can you laser weld? And so what I care about is actually having solder coverage all the way throughout whatever I attach. And laser welding, are you able to get full coverage like that? I thought it had to have a join point that you were working on.
I don't know. I'm just speaking out of my, you know what.
No, I'm good with it. Tell me other ideas. I might not have thought of it.
I mean, I really cannot see how would I solder it without spilling or having some kind of spillage.
Well, I'm actually counting on that spillage. I want solder all over this, right? All over the line between this and my back plate, because that's going to be adding to the strengthening of this seam, or the lack of seam. It's the fold combined with full coverage solder is going to make it stronger. It's like a layering that it creates
Right,
creates a barrier.
right. Oh, clever.
Would it be sweat solder then? The whole
So
thing?
yeah, I'm going to sweat solder the heck out of it.
Okay.
So I'm just doing some general sanding to get this nice and flush, so that I know that I've got a good fit. Get the last of the excess solder off. Make sure it's nice and squared up. One corner that still has that extra solder in it. And this is, for me, this is, like when I'm on screen for you guys, I worry about whether this is tedious, because it can be tedious to just watch somebody file. But this is part of the process for me of stretching the bounds of what I'm doing with the material. Is to find new ways to connect and new ways to adorn and add and take away. That's part of the fun part for me, is figuring out something that I haven't previously done. And what the heck, why not do it on live TV for people to stare and point? It's a thing.
Well, it's the process.
Pardon?
We're all been there. It's like when I was riveting, I think I was riveting for 3 hours because I didn't want to heat it.
Yeah. But you got it, right? You got there. That's the important
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, it was like 3 or 4 in the morning by then.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's when I say I probably should stop right now. Okay, so what I'm seeing happen on this one segment that I can't quite figure out is that it's going relatively flush on one side, but not as flush on the other. So I'm trying to figure out whether it's that I'm not wide enough or not cornered enough, and that's unclear to me. But anything that's supposed to have some kind of mechanical element to it, that's going to make a difference. These tiny little bits of solder or angle differences when you didn't get it as squared up as you thought, or what have you, really add up over the course of a tiny mechanism. The hidden toggle clasp, that is one that I teach in the workshop sometimes. It really needs the absolute bare minimum between its twisting component is key and the plate against which it rests, or else it fails completely. I'm still not thrilled with this. I need a better fit.
Would you consider making a mold before you finally do it?
So that's an interesting concept, is would it be stronger if cast? And I think the answer is no, because casting is inherently annealed, and this would be really hard to work harden. I mean, maybe you could do a heat hardening, but anything cast with this thin a material runs a risk of failure. Yeah, I'm not sure. So one thing I'd say for sure is this concept of a clasp would be more durable in brass or in nickel than in the sterling that I'm making it in. So that's one thing that could improve it.
I would say the cleanup and the casting would be one big PIA.
Yeah, probably. Okay, where are you sticking, you silly thing? Not sticking on the portals. Must just not be squared up in the corners like I think it is. Different files, you can get it more flush. So this is one of the hard parts for me is you guys know, I'm not meticulous. I don't do perfect angles and corners and clean straight lines. It's not in me. I don't have the patience. I don't have the eye for it. I mean, I do have the eye. I can see when it needs to happen, but I don't have, it's just not my style of making. It never has been something that I wanted to pursue. It's one of the reasons I don't do, lots of wedding bands and things like that with precision work. But that means that I lose out on some of the cooler mechanisms because I don't have that level of precision. And I would say it's one of the reasons that I wanted to do the Cogswell project was I knew it was going to improve my small work skills, and it did. Doesn't mean I'm there yet. So, let's see, find a way to show you guys what I'm seeing. I'm going to put some blue marker down on the spots that it's sticking. Oh, maybe it's that inside solder. That could be it. And this is one of those situations where I could probably live with it. Let me zoom in for you guys so you can see. So I've marked in blue the wall back here. You see how gappy it is? right there and there that you can see the blue. This is with me pulling it snugly against the wall. And that's what you see me futzing and fiddling with, is trying to get it even more flush against the back plate. What I'm finding is I can't quite tell what's jamming it up, because I've got good fit over here,
Can't see.
and I've got good, oops, sorry. I've got
Okay.
good fit over here and here,
Mm-hmm.
and only so-so fit in the middle sections. So that's gotta mean that I've got a curve somewhere. Either my bar is curved, which is a possibility. Maybe that's part of my problem. Or I've still got some stuff gunking it up in the interior corners. Let me do a little more work on the interior corners. And this is the kind of thing where if you have other questions unrelated to this, I can sometimes answer while in mid-file.
I have a question about sand casting. Have you done
Sure.
that?
I have Delft sand, yep.
I
The
bought a
name.
little kit and I'm getting ready to
Yep,
just practice with it.
okay. Most important,
But I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos
Yep.
and there's like a lot of undercuts sometimes, like with the ring,
mhm.
that you have to add like it seemed like a rod in the middle.
So
Or
it's not that you're adding a rod, it's that you're adding an air hole. That's true of any casting, by the way, that you have to worry about the undercuts. What you're adding, you're using the rod to create a channel that you then leave open so that the metal can flow down to the difficult parts. So spruing is the general term.
Yeah, I learned when in doubt, sprue.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
And-
And in sand casting, two of the most important things are they aren't kidding when they say pack it tight,
Uh-huh.
and don't forget your talcum powder or whatever you're using for your release.
That's it's not that difficult. I know I have the same setup. It's not that difficult. It's what Rachel said. The channel, where the metal enters,
Yes.
that is crucial.
And always have way more metal molten than you think you need. And don't forget to keep the opening of the crucible heated as you're pouring. Because one of the things that happens is people get sort of gluggy partway through. Quite close in. Meaning it doesn't keep flowing and you lose the far ends of what you're casting because of that, because it cools too quickly because you're not keeping it heated as it's coming out of the pour.
Yeah, that's my concern. But I was gonna do like a little pacifier to start with, just something like simple
Sure.
like that. That's solid.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I would
Um,
honestly say anytime you're doing pour of that scale, especially if it's the first time you're doing it, see if you can find a studio buddy and wear good, if you have them, steel-toed shoes and stand, don't sit to pour, be able to get out of the way if anything goes wrong and you start spilling molten metal.
mhm.
And it's got to have an equator. Anything you do, right, Rachel?
It's got a what?
It's got to have an equator. The
What do you mean?
delta.
What do you
I
mean, Peter?
mean, because this is just two sides.
Yeah.
So
Oh, you mean as a pour point?
yeah,
Yes, sorry. I was like, why? I was thinking you meant it had to be equal balanced on both sides. But yeah, yep.
Mm,
The main point of pour.
Yeah, I get that because I have some sprues from when I made molds before, two-part epoxy sort of thing. Rubber molds and whatever, just playing around. But I was starting to get confused when they had the vents, and also when the top and the bottom are put together and then they put even vents going all the way across. like
Yeah,
even with a
it's, so
toothpick.
vents, it's been a long time, but there's something about the vents need to go at a certain angle so that they're pushing air up instead of metal up. I think they have to come back up, but I would read up on that one. I can't, don't trust my word. My recollection is foggy on that,
It looks so simple,
Yeah,
right?
it's not
but
that
it's all set
difficult.
up, I think. Set
Have
up.
you done casting before, Carmen?
Long time ago, but I didn't. I was with my instructor at the time.
Yeah, it's just a little bit different. You know, have you come across someone named Craig Dabler on Facebook?
Yeah, I
He
joined
has
that
this.
group. I joined that group and I bought
Oh,
his
great.
setup.
Yeah, that's the setup that you bought, right?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's so simple. And
Yeah.
I know he keeps refining everything. You should go back and read up again. And
Yeah.
I think
He's
that's
pretty-
the simplest setup I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
He's pretty good about answering questions on his group too, from what
Yes.
I saw.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I joined the group and I bought the kit and I'm getting all the accessories like the trays and whatever I saw. But then I'm confused with either using a hammer or they talked about a tart wood.
A
No.
tart.
Just a hammer is good enough. I've done it with a thrift shop hammer. You're
Mhm.
packing the sand. The sand has to be packed.
Yeah.
You don't need anything special as long as you can pack it. You can
Mhm.
use the shoe. No,
Mhm.
I'm just kidding. Shoe. But yeah, he's good. He's very good. I met him in Tucson.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
Okay, this is, I think, as good as I'm getting, given that I suspect the last of my challenge is that it has a tiny warpage in the bar. So now this defines for me what are the stopper points that I need to put in. And I need to put them in so that this is snugly closed. And then I've got enough support to stop the bar, to let the bar snap in. So I need my bars to land there, basically. And I don't need them all the way out, but I could. I'm gonna be putting a crossbar here, and then I'm gonna put a little piece on either end. And I'm doing this with the same basic gauge. I think I didn't have any left of the exact 9 gauge. So I'm going up to a whopping 8 or something like that. But I'm just using pieces that will fit on the rod, and I want them to be flush on the ends. So that means sawing them and then filing them. And I don't need terribly large pieces. I just need enough to be the catch point. So I'm going to basically make them the length of the uprights. Where did I put my saw down? There we go. So let's get this first one is going to be a little guy. And again, I'm going to have some filing and stuff. In fact, I'm going to start by filing so I have one good end. Handy dandy vise here.
What is an underglaze pencil? Or what do you need an underglaze pencil for?
In the context of sand casting, I have no idea. In the context
No,
of
in the
enameling,
context of jewelry making.
it's an enameling pencil. So on certain glass enamels, it's kind of like, think of it as a grease pencil, but it won't melt away unless you overfire.
Oh,
And so
so
if you look at Anne Havel's work, she does a lot of pencil work on her enamels, and then you can sometimes you just fire it, other times you put another layer of transparent or something over it.
oh, I see.
What brought that up from what we're looking at now? Or are you shopping online and saw something cool?
Because I have it here for a long time and I don't know what it is or why is it here.
Did you ever take an enameling class?
No,
Well, that's extra weird then.
Yeah, this must be some trick that can be done with the sterling silver, but I don't know what it is because this
Is
is
it-
completely
can
lead free.
also,
Is it black liquid?
you can also,
What was that, Stephanie?
Is it black liquid?
No, it's a pencil actually, a pencil.
Oh,
like
okay. Okay.
you
Why?
can use it to mark on a crucible and it survives the heat on a crucible.
Ah.
I've seen people use those for that.
Oh, that would make sense, because it's just sort of a glass, when you put your flux in, it's a glass coating. So you could mark it as this is my gold crucible.
Yeah. Now it makes sense.
Brilliant. I like that.
Thank you. Yeah. I have other things. Do you have time? No.
Is this the figure out what you've got session of our series?
Yeah, that will be neat, actually. Everybody has things that they don't know or they forgot.
I have a question about the actual crucible that
Yeah.
you melt the silver in.
Mhm.
I saw that they were putting, they have to dress it. How exactly do you dress it?
So you got some flux, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got not the kind of flux we use when we're at the bench soldering things.
Borax.
Pardon?
Oh, borax.
The borax flux, yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to heat the crucible evenly. And then you're gonna start with just pinches. And put those in and get them flowing and get them melting and becoming glassy. And get them, once you get it's a seasoning basically is what you're doing. And you want to keep the heat up, get it to that orange glow that gets it glassy. And then swirl it around until you've coated the entire thing, including the pour segment. So you got to have it coming out the lip, but it's really easy to overdo. And it gets hard to clean up if you overdo it. So put in a pinch at a time and swirl it until you can't swirl it anymore, and then add a pinch more and add a pinch more.
Okay.
9 times out of 10, people overdo how much flux needs to go in there. And then let it cool and make sure you've got it everywhere. And go from there.
Yeah, because I tried doing it a while ago. I think I added too much.
Lots of people do.
And I
Myself
don't
included.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Super
Does it
easy to
melt
overdo.
off?
Pardon?
That when you're firing it, does the borax melt off if you've added too much?
So the borax floats to the top. This is something that you really want to take a workshop on to get good about what's happening to metal. Because my describing it is not going to really get you all the way there. But what the borax is doing is picking up impurities and floating to the top of the metal. So while the metal is molten, it's going to protect it from sticking hard to the material of the crucible, but then it also helps coat the material you're melting and pulls the impurities up, and then you can scrape it a little bit. I use a carbon rod, but some people use other things.
Yeah, I have one of those.
Sort of skim the top, right? So it's helping to clean it. The act of fluxing something in metal is all about keeping the oxygen from oxidizing and creating, what we know as fire scale and fire stain and the blackening that we get on sterling as we're firing and so on. So since you're getting to a molten state, it's really important that you don't get impurities in it right before you pour.
And
So-
Carmen, it'll help you season it if you heat the crucible first before you add. And some instructors teach you to use just borax to season it, and some tell you to use a 50-50 mix of boric acid and borax. It depends who you learn from.
Boric acid and borax? Okay.
Isn't there something about most boric acid that you have to be careful that it's not contaminated with other things? Because when it's used in cleaning solutions, it's blended, or is that
Yeah.
one of the two?
Yeah, no, you do. Yeah, it's the boric acid that you want to make sure they didn't add something else.
Yeah.
I
And
was always told just to use a pinch, and you
Yeah.
have to preheat the crucible
Mhm.
and your metal. That's why it's good to have two people. I agree. You need a partner, because that way somebody's there heating things with the torch and you're handling all the pieces and getting them at the right spot. And somehow you have to accomplish those two things at once, which I always found challenging casting. But, seasoning the crucible with the borax, making sure that's hot, making sure your metal stays molten, and then pouring. I think it's remembering a demo I saw on doing the sand casting. It was way easier because you don't have to do all the other extra things. But I don't remember about the borax and the sand casting. That's something I know I want to do again. So I'll probably be asking Craig the same questions.
so the borax is not for the sand casting itself, it's for your crucible,
Correct.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
anytime, so you need that seasoned
Right.
anytime you can use it for molten stuff.
Right, before you melt your metal. Yeah, I remember, yes.
Yeah, but
Also-
my teacher always used to add like a pinch of borax when on top of the molten metal.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, but before you even put your first metal in, you need to do the seasoning. It's like
the
it's
seasoning,
like-
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like a cast iron pan, right? If you, once
Yeah.
you've got it prepped and you care
Yes.
for it, you'll be fine.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
But this sounds like it's something that you should really look into, a specific class that teaches it, Carmen.
Mhm. Well, IOD, I must have watched like 7 or 8 or 9
Yeah.
sand casting.
Yeah, I don't
videos.
I don't think if I was you, I wouldn't go to a class. Just whatever you have watched and ask this guy, Craig,
Mhm.
because I remember when I saw the instructor doing it, he didn't do much. Just the packing. That
Right.
packing is what he kept on telling us, and I saw how he was doing it. He was doing it with a regular hammer.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
A shorthand hammer. You know how they have now? You
Yeah,
probably
it looks
see
like
that's
the
a carpenter hammer, but it's a short handle.
yeah.
I don't know how the proper name of it, but I don't know. I think those are better on your hand. I'm not sure. Well, I'm
Yeah, I've
excited.
seen them use different things for packing. Mhm.
Well, I look forward to seeing whatever your attempts are.
Yeah, me too.
One more thing. I get bored easily.
Have you already done metal clay?
No, it's one thing I haven't done.
Don't give her ideas.
No. I mean, I thought of it. I even had the book and I gave it away. I get into other things. Like I rather focus more on fabrication,
Yeah.
learning the soldering. I got the hydraulic press, so I've been learning how to use that with pancake dies. And riveting. I'm trying to learn that. And of course, I want to go back to your videos because I missed a gem setting.
Oh, during the Cogswell series?
Yeah.
You missed only one? That's impressive.
No, I missed
Doing it.
watching you do it.
Got it. Well,
Oh,
I'm
I
sure
probably only missed one, if that. Yeah, I saw them
we'll
all.
have some gem setting in the future. In fact, I think I'd said I wanted to put a couple of bezel set sapphires on top of the reticulation once this is put together. We'll see if I still feel that way after soldering all these little fiddly bits on.
I wanted to ask you a question about the clasp that you're doing. How flush do you want the two pieces to be?
How flat or flush? What do you
Flush,
think?
flush.
So I want them, so this whole sequence, here, let me draw this, guys, because this is pretty small, the part I'm working on now. and it'll make more sense if I can do the scale of it. And I also cleaned my studio on our break and can't find anything anymore. So we have the wall that we've cut into with these little segments, right?
Right.
And then at the base of that is this piece of back plate, which is 18 gauge. And we've got coming out of that, we've got our little slots and the cross piece slot. Right, so this is all how it can come in. And so that's the mechanism that by which it's getting pulled out to the other side. So when it's got a piece in it, it's gonna have this, right? These square
Right.
rods are
Mhm.
coming out of it. And they should be resting on the back plate. So they're going to be the thickness, they're going to be raised off of the back by the thickness of the back plate. So just an 18 gauge sheets worth of height.
Right, okay.
Right. And then when we're looking inside of it, we're looking from the top down. We've got our little channels.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got the angle that this is coming in. This is bad drawing. So we've got our little angle that it comes in. When we have it closed, it needs to be right up here on the piece, on the crossbar. So it should be resting there. And then again, our little pieces come out the front. So it's divided by the 18 gauge wall. And then
Oh,
what I'm working, the fiddly bit that I'm working on now is the thing that holds it there, which is I'm putting right butted up against on each of these. Oops, I put it on the wrong segment. A sec. So not on the channels, but on the in between the channels. So these solid pieces of backplate. This is all backplate, right? I'm putting these right up to the edge blocks. So that if we were to look at a side view sliced, if we were to look inside this, get my colors be consistent with my colors. We're looking at the wall, we're looking at the back plate. We're looking at our square rod that's sitting there locked in with it coming out here, right? Those are all coming out in varying angles across that. So our square rod is running across. And then the purple plates are locking it in. Right? So if I'm looking up, if I'm looking side on to it, I've got wall going that way. See if I can get any dimensionality to this drawing for you guys. I've got rod tucked in just inside the wall. And then I've got a series of the little bricks that are holding it in place. They're locking it down. And then, of course, coming out the front, I've got those in betweens. Wherever I don't have the rods, I've got the little out parts. I don't know if that drawing is helping or not. So this is my side view. So I get the plates in. So if we're looking this way, where's my zoom? If we're looking straight on from the side, so this is our front, and we're looking straight on from the side, I've got a little bit of, I've got my green rod that comes out, and then I've got my purple rods holding it in place, resting against it. And the act of having these butted up against each other is what holds them. Is that making any sense?
oh, yes. I can understand better. Did you say you did a paper model?
No, I did the silver model that we saw that I've been playing with the version that I've got here that I was playing around with when I first designed it.
Oh,
So this was the mock-up And then you can see how it rests. So looking into it, you can see we've got the bar resting up against the wall. These would be the purple markings. Those are the little rods that are holding it in place. There was a third one here. And I'm going to be adding more than that in the new version. And then it should, when they're all in place, it should click in just snugly enough into those purple bars. So those are the fiddly bits that I'm cutting out now, which is why I'm squaring them up nicely. And
Well,
say again?
it's very ingenious, but it needs a long preparation.
Yes, yeah, this is not a fast clasp. Nor do we have guarantee of success. As we know, we've got a weak spot that we got to deal with. So I want to get the mechanism set up first, and 6:40. We're not getting this soldered tonight, gang, because I'm gonna not have all of the pieces cut. But let's pause there then. So my next step is to get all of those little components squared up. And I will probably, so that we don't get bored with me folding and bending and fitting to that piece, I'll probably make the back plate wrapper that we're talking about before our next session, depending on my schedule. And then, so I'm going to solder down all the little components and make sure that it snaps into place the way I want it locked, because then I have my interior mechanism complete. Then I'll put down the folded plate to give it more strength. And in the meantime, that'll give me a couple weeks to think about whether there's anything better that I can do for that. And after that, we will cap it next session. So that's my goal, is next session, teaching you guys about insetting into the top of a frame, a layer, in this case, of reticulation, although it's not limited to that. The technique is actually really cool if you ever, for example, want to do a domed lid. Do I have any examples of that?
Yeah, I was thinking I have seen this. And now that you say dome, now I get it.
So domed, either concave or convex.
Yes. Why is this on?
I'll try to, I have little boxes. I teach a little boxes class, and I have some little boxes that have the example of setting it in as a domed or a non-domed, odd shaped. But what we're creating is a solder place that we can rest it into. Which again, you can do it. You could bezel set your lids, absolutely bezel set away to give yourself the upper edge. But this is a technique where we're using a graver to put little stitches in that act as sort of temporary holding points for it where you want it. And then you go in and solder the piece. So it's going to be a tricky one because it gets hot, and I'm hoping it doesn't melt out all the work that I've done on the interior. This is not an easy one.
Are you going to tin your little block pieces before you? Tin means flow solder on them first.
Oh, okay. Tin to me is what you do when you're coating copper with silver.
Okay, well, it's you can use it as that too, but I'm just thinking, if you flow some solder on it first, and you may need to hit it with a file and smooth it. Then when you put them on your little raised pieces, which are going to act like a shelf, you'll already have more solder there, better contact.
So the only challenge is that in order to get that clean snap of the square wire slotted, I don't want excess solder around it. True. But your question makes me wonder whether I'm better off doing the wrapper before I do. So here's my big worries looking ahead, gang. Worry one is how to keep that tiny tab strong. And that means I need to solder something on right now. That's my best thought on that. I need to solder that wrapper that I was talking about. So that's going to be a lot of heat that I got to control. Number two is when I put the top on, it becomes a little easy bake oven. And so things can move and flow. But once I put the lid on, I can't get back to move them around, right? So I've got two really high risk solder exercises in this. And the order of operations is limited because I have to have my mechanism working before I cap the whole thing. I can't get in to make adjustments to it. This is one of the challenges you'll have on certain clasps, no matter what. And it's one of the reasons that I teach the order of operations I do when I teach a box clasp of building it upside down. So those two things are going to add up to challenges and which solders I use when, right? So I ideally probably want to try and get my little blocks on with hard solder, and may even, because I got to do this wrapper concept, I may even end up doing my lid with easy, which I hate using easy.
Why couldn't you either do the wrapper if you want to do that first with hard, then do the blocks with medium? And yes, I would use easy probably for the lid. I mean,
So the answer on the wrapper,
seems-
I can't do hard on this wrapper because I've already built my frame with hard and medium. And so it'll unflow if I'm covering the whole thing.
Right.
Because I got to get flow on everything.
Right.
And so I'll risk my pieces that are already soldered separating and moving apart. So I really want to use medium for my wrapper. But once it's soldered down with medium, I'm not worried that that's going to flow out of position. So the more that I'm talking it through, the more I think that the wrapper has to come before the little blocks. Because then I can do a small but hot torch in just to get my solder down on the blocks. And then I'll decide whether those are high risk for moving as I do the topper. My ideal would be to also do the topper with medium, because otherwise the color differential is going to bug the heck out of me on this.
well, the other thing you could do is go ahead and once you're got the blocks in place, is put some yellow ochre on them, because once you put the block on, you could still, because you've got slots, you could get in there, with something like that has a nozzle that you can flush that yellow ochre out of there. And if you are
I'm not averse to the idea of flushing it because it's a hollow form. I'm going to have to. Yellow ochre is a flow stop, not a, it's not going to stop the solder from melting. It will stop it from flowing onto the spots it's on. So it wouldn't like flow up if I coated the little tops of them or anything like that.
right.
But I also personally, like, I would, even if I were going to do that approach, which I'll think about it because I want to really consider that idea as to whether it benefits. I would go with water-based whiteout instead.
Right.
Yellow ochre is hell on earth.
Right.
I
That's
don't
what I
think
was
that
going to
is
say,
real.
is using something, even red rouge it works the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But the
I
idea being,
agree.
in addition to the fact that a solder is harder to flow the second time.
Yes.
So if you're
Which-
using hard solder on that and you've used medium on the wrapper, the likelihood, fingers crossed,
Yep.
is that when you put the lid on, you're not going to get a lot of movement from that.
Which is why I'm hoping I'll feel comfortable using medium on the lid by the time I'm there.
Right.
'Cause I think, so what I'm balancing, gang, and this is something that you should think about with any soldering exercise. The ideal is hard to medium, or even hard to medium only for the last bits. And ideally no easy, but it's not unheard of if you need it. And there's even an extra easy, which I have, but I use it about once a year. But the challenge that I've got added to this, because it's a hollow form, is that it becomes that little oven. So it has more than if I were, say, just layering these things together, right? More chance that it's going to cave or flow because it's become hotter than I realize. So that's an exercise. I mean, this is a challenging set of soldering, gang. And all good ideas, we'll talk them through. And when I'm not thinking already about the fact that I have to go pack my van for the show this weekend, then I'll maybe give myself some headspace to come up with alternatives. But yeah, this is a fiddly clasp, and I hope it comes out the way that I'm thinking it will by the time we're done. But next up, some combination of wrapper and stopper. Any other questions from anyone before we wrap for the evening, or anything else you want to share?
Not really. Just it's good to have you sweat the challenge.
You're not following along at home on this one?
No, 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 no. Not
You guys are just waiting to see if I succeed or fail before you're even going to try. I see how it is.
yeah.
Got to jump off the
that's
cliff with me.
that's part of the quote unquote fun of it. And that's
Uh-huh.
part of what keeps jewelry making interesting to me, is that I
Absolutely.
have to use my brain, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, I'm gonna do something and it's not gonna work, and I've learned something, and when you finish this piece and it's good, then the next time you want to create something of this scale, you'll have already done a lot of the thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And that's another thing to think about, gang. When you hit something that is new and big, take it apart. You know, it's the how to eat an elephant, one forkful at a time, right? This piece conceptually has a whole bunch of elements I'm already comfortable with. It's just how I'm tangling them together that's making it scary, right? I make hollow forms all the time. I make inset things all the time. I make reticulation stuff all the time. I make mechanisms a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time. So they're all elements that individually are things I'm already capable of. And you all should be thinking about your challenges, especially anything in your box that is, I put it aside because I didn't know how to do it. Think about the forkful at a time, right? Think about, don't get overwhelmed by the, oh my God, I'm never going to make exactly what I thought. Think about what are the things that I've already done before. When I talk to people about hollow forms, I talk about, okay, could you make a cabochon bezel, a walled cabochon bezel? You can, great. You're going to make one of those and put a lid on it, right? It's a lot less scary than, oh my gosh, I'm making a box that could explode, right? Sure, there's nuance to how you're going to do it, but think about the bites that you already know how to do on whatever you're stuck on in your pile. So with that bit of wisdom, gang, I'm going to go pack for a show.
I hope it turns out great. Hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Have a good one.
Yep. Our next session, just so you know, is September 18th, I think, third Wednesday. So hopefully I'll see y'all then, and maybe we'll make considerabably more progress on this puppy.
We will look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Right. Bye,
Thank
gang.
Bye.
Thank you,
you.
Rachel. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.